The Grand Avalon Hotel's ballroom was a masterpiece of luxury and power. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers dripping with light, walls lined with gold leaf, and intricate murals depicting scenes of triumph and conquest. The air smelled of polished marble, expensive cologne, and the faintest hint of jasmine from the flower arrangements that crowned every table. Outside, the New York skyline twinkled beneath the deepening night sky, but inside, the atmosphere was taut, electric, as if the entire world had gathered here in this one room, held in a fragile balance between collaboration and conflict. This was the annual Global Summit, a secretive meeting where the world's richest billionaires convened to discuss deals worth billions, decisions that could shift markets and reshape industries overnight. Men and women draped in designer suits and gowns spoke in hushed tones, their conversations a mix of business jargon and subtle power plays. The chatter was punctuated by the clinking of crystal glasses and the soft jazz drifting from a corner band. Yet beneath the surface glitter, tensions simmered. In a narrow hallway behind the glittering ballroom, the sounds of the party faded into a steady rhythm of footsteps, clinking dishes, and the soft hiss of coffee machines. Here moved Emily Carter, a young waitress whose life was worlds apart from the moguls above. Emily's uniform was worn but clean, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her hands, slender and steady, balanced a silver tray piled with flutes of champagne. She spoke quietly, respectfully, yet carried herself with an ease born of years, serving tables in high-pressure environments. What no one in the ballroom knew was that Emily spoke 5 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, and Russian. Not from privilege or expensive schooling, but through grit, self-study, and necessity. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where every language was a key to survival and opportunity. Tonight, she was not just a waitress. Unseen and unheard, she was about to become the key to something much bigger. Suddenly, a sharp voice shattered the soft hum of conversation in the ballroom. "Where is Jonathan Blake? He was scheduled to give the opening speech 15 minutes ago." The name echoed through the room. Jonathan Blake, American billionaire, founder of one of the largest tech conglomerates in the world, and a man whose presence could sway markets and minds alike. The room's polite murmur shifted instantly into whispers of concern and confusion. "Has anyone seen him?" "He was here a moment ago." A cold silence fell. Then a chilling announcement crackled through the sound system, its tone official and commanding. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen. For security reasons, the building has been locked down. No one will enter or exit until further notice." Gasps and shocked whispers erupted. The gleaming doors at the entrance of the ballroom swung closed, locking automatically with a mechanical click that sounded like a verdict. Phones lit up as attendees tried to call out, but suddenly signals dropped dead. No Wi-Fi, no cell reception. The technological lifelines that these billionaires relied on vanished in an instant. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Around her, the panic spread like wildfire. A delegate muttered anxiously in French. A group near the windows whispered rapid Mandarin. From the kitchen doorway, Emily watched as the power players' confident masks cracked, revealing raw fear and uncertainty beneath. Suddenly, a young man rushed toward her, his jacket half off, face pale and sweaty. "Waitress, you speak 5 languages, right?" His voice was urgent, breathless. "We need you. This isn't just a lockdown. There are threats. They want money. And they said someone here is a target." Emily's heart hammered. She'd never been part of anything like this. But she nodded slowly. "Tell me everything," she said. He pulled a crumpled note from his pocket. "It's a ransom demand, $1 billion, transferred within the hour, or someone dies." The words hung in the air, heavy as the chandeliers above. Emily's gaze swept over the crowd. Men and women whose fortunes dwarfed entire countries, now prisoners in a golden cage. She heard a muffled sob behind a column and caught a cold, calculating look from a man who never smiled. In the shadows of power, something dark was unfolding. Emily swallowed hard. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a fight for survival. And she was the unexpected key. As the minutes ticked by, the tension tightened. Outside, the city lights shone obliviously. Inside, the richest people in the world were trapped, and the poor waitress who spoke 5 languages was about to become their only hope. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration, but a cage, humming with anxiety. The golden chandeliers overhead now cast long, ominous shadows, and the polished marble seemed colder, less inviting. Emily stood just outside the main hall, clutching the crumpled ransom note with trembling fingers. The words on it echoed in her mind. $1 billion within the hour, or someone dies. She glanced back at the crowd inside. Powerful men and women, titans of industry, now reduced to whispers and restless pacing. It was surreal and terrifying. Suddenly, a man approached her quickly, his eyes scanning the room nervously. "Emily, right?" he said in a low voice, careful not to draw attention. She nodded. "I'm Mark. I work for the summit's organizing committee. We need your help." Emily's brow furrowed. "Why me?" Mark swallowed hard. "Because you speak the languages no one else does fluently. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Russian. You understand the nuances, the subtleties. We're dealing with people from all over, and tensions are rising. We need someone who can navigate all that." Emily's heart pounded. This was far beyond anything she'd imagined when she signed up for a waitressing shift. "Okay," she said, voice steady despite the chaos. "What do you need me to do?" Mark looked relieved. "We need to connect with the delegates directly, to calm fears, gather information, and relay messages accurately. There are mistrust and misunderstandings everywhere. We can't afford mistakes." Emily nodded again and allowed herself a moment to breathe. She could do this. She had to. As she moved back into the ballroom, her senses sharpened. The air was thick with whispered arguments in multiple languages, some desperate, some angry, some fearful. She paused beside a cluster of French delegates. Their rapid-fire French conversations revealed growing panic over the security breach. Switching effortlessly, Emily translated to Mark, who was coordinating with the hotel's security via a discreet earpiece. Next, she approached a small group of Russian businessmen, their voices low and clipped, laden with suspicion. Emily carefully interpreted their concerns into Mandarin for a nearby Chinese delegate, diffusing a brewing argument before it could erupt. In this chaos, Emily was a thread weaving disparate groups into a fragile fabric of communication. Amid the noise, a woman's voice stopped Emily. "You speak beautifully." Emily turned to see a tall woman with sharp grey eyes and a tailored navy suit. "I'm Claire Dawson. I handle security for the summit." Emily offered a cautious smile. "Thank you. I'm Emily." Claire's gaze was piercing. "You have a rare skill set. I'd like to work with you." For a moment, Emily hesitated. Then, sensing Claire's genuine urgency, she nodded. Together, they moved through the crowd. Claire explained, "There's more at play here than just a ransom demand. We believe someone inside this room is working with the attackers." Emily's stomach clenched. Betrayal within the ranks. This made the stakes even higher. Their partnership was uneasy but necessary. Claire's sharp experience complemented Emily's linguistic skill and emotional insight. As they worked, Emily noticed subtle shifts in the crowd. A glance exchanged between 2 men, a whispered warning, a tightened jaw. She understood that the Tycoons' polished exteriors hid deep wounds, old grudges, power struggles, personal secrets. And perhaps the key to stopping this crisis lay buried in those secrets. Just as Emily began to feel a fragile rhythm in their efforts, the lights flickered violently. A hush fell over the room. Then the lights went out completely. The darkness was absolute, oppressive. From the blackness, a cold, distorted voice spoke over the speakers. "If you want to survive tonight, listen carefully. The game has just begun." Emily's breath hitched. She locked eyes with Claire. This was no longer just a threat. It was a declaration of war. The ballroom plunged into total darkness, the sudden void swallowing the murmurs and gasps. Panic rippled instantly through the crowd, a living wave of fear crashing against the walls of luxury. Emily's pulse raced as she instinctively reached for Claire's arm. The security expert's grip was firm but calm, a rare anchor in the storm. "Stay close," Claire whispered, her voice a lifeline in the blackness. "This is exactly what they want, to break us." Emily nodded, swallowing the rising panic in her throat. Her mind raced, parsing the languages she'd overheard earlier, piecing together scattered clues from every conversation she'd translated. Somewhere inside this room of billionaires and delegates, a saboteur lurked, someone who knew every secret passage, every weak link. "Emily," Claire's voice cut sharply, "we need to find out who's behind this, before it's too late." Emily's thoughts flicked to Jonathan Blake, the missing tech titan whose absence had sparked the chaos. His reputation for ruthless innovation and ruthless enemies was legendary. If he was the target, the danger wasn't just financial. It was deadly. Mark appeared beside them, panting slightly. "There's more," he said urgently. "I intercepted a fragment of a message, encrypted but clear enough to warn that someone here will be targeted next." Emily's stomach tightened. "Who?" He shook his head. "We don't know. But the name Jonathan Blake was mentioned." Claire's eyes narrowed. "That confirms it. This isn't random, it's personal." Emily swallowed hard. The stakes had just spiraled beyond anything she'd imagined. Suddenly, emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. The crowd's frantic whispers rose again, punctuated by sharp bursts of anger and fear. Claire turned to Emily. "I need you to move through the groups, listen carefully and translate everything. We can't afford mistrust or misinformation." Emily felt the weight settle heavily on her shoulders but nodded. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a lifeline, a translator, a bridge between chaos and control. Moving steadily through the room, Emily overheard fragments in Spanish, Russian, French, Mandarin and English. Each snippet revealed cracks, old rivalries, secret deals gone sour, whispered accusations. At one point, she caught a heated exchange in Russian between two men. Speaking softly, she translated to Claire, who then relayed a calm response back through Emily. The game was delicate. One wrong word, one mistranslation could ignite a powder keg. Then, amid the growing tension, a sudden crash shattered the fragile calm. Glass shattered near the bar, and a woman screamed. Emily turned to see a young delegate clutching her ankle, eyes wide with shock. Claire rushed forward. She either tripped or was pushed, Claire muttered grimly, scanning the crowd. Emily knelt beside the woman, offering steady reassurance. "Can you speak?" she asked gently. The delegate nodded weakly and whispered in Mandarin, "Someone wants to stop us." Emily translated quickly. Whispers of suspicion erupted. The threat wasn't just external, it was inside. Fear, twisted faces, eyes darted, searching for the traitor. Emily's gaze landed on a quiet man near the edge of the room, a delegate from Switzerland, calm but watchful. Something about him felt off. Before she could react, the fire alarm blared suddenly, sharp, urgent. Claire's voice rang out, commanding, "Don't move, it's a distraction!" But the damage was done. The chaos deepened. Emily's mind raced. If the alarm was a ploy, what was the real danger? And could they stop the next strike? Her chest tightened with dread. Time was running out. The fate of the summit and their lives hung by a thread. The fire alarm's shrill cry sliced through the ballroom like a knife, sending waves of confusion crashing over the already fractured crowd. Panic sparked anew as some guests instinctively moved toward the exits, forgetting the locked doors, while others froze, unsure of what to believe. Claire's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay where you are. This is a trap." But her warning was almost lost amid the cacophony of footsteps and shouted commands. Emily gripped Claire's arm, the noise disorienting her senses. The polished floors beneath her feet reflected flickering emergency lights that painted long, shifting shadows, ghostly reminders of the danger closing in. She scanned the room, trying to make sense of the chaos through the torrent of voices in multiple languages. Her heart pounded as she realized that the attackers were playing psychological warfare, exploiting every crack in the group's fragile unity. "Emily, we need to regroup and secure the communication lines," Claire said urgently. "If we can't talk to the outside world, we have to control what's inside." Emily nodded, swallowing her fear. Together with Mark and a handful of trusted staff, they began to move discreetly through the crowd, relaying Claire's orders. Emily's multilingual skills became a lifeline, translating urgent messages, calming fears, and preventing fights before they erupted. But every attempt to restore order met resistance. Mistrust ran deep. Some delegates accused others of collusion. Old grudges resurfaced with venomous intensity, and the air thickened with paranoia. Emily found herself pulled into heated arguments in Spanish and French, smoothing tensions with careful words. She felt exhausted, but pushed herself harder. The stakes were too high. Meanwhile, Claire moved swiftly, coordinating with security teams to sweep the building for potential threats. Emily caught fleeting glimpses of her, always vigilant, always precise. In the midst of this storm, a whispered secret came to light. A key document crucial to the summit's agenda had gone missing. The so-called Black Ledger contained details that could topple governments and ruin careers. Whispers swirled that the ledger's theft was connected to the threats and the lockdown. Emily's stomach knotted. If the ledger was lost or destroyed, the summit's fragile peace would shatter completely. As tensions escalated, a sudden power surge plunged the ballroom into darkness again. The panic became tangible, a living beast that roared in the hearts of the trapped. Emily's breath hitched as a piercing scream echoed near the back of the room. She rushed toward the sound with Claire and Mark, weaving through frightened guests. There, lying near a shattered vase, was Jonathan Blake, the missing billionaire, unconscious. A deep gash bleeding from his temple. Gasps filled the room as Emily knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. His eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding them. "Jonathan," Claire said sharply, "who attacked you? Who's behind this?" Jonathan's lips trembled as he tried to speak. "It's inside. Someone we all trust." Emily felt the weight of his words settle heavily. The enemy was closer than anyone had dared imagine. As Jonathan was helped to a nearby seat, the crowd's anxiety exploded into chaos. Accusations flew like daggers, alliances shattered, and the air buzzed with fear and suspicion. Emily's role became even more vital. She moved tirelessly, translating, calming, connecting fragmented groups in a desperate attempt to keep order. But beneath the surface, a deeper truth lurked, a secret someone was willing to kill for. And as the clock ticked mercilessly down toward the ransom deadline, Emily realized that saving the summit meant confronting not just external threats, but the darkness hidden within. The walls closed in. The game was far from over. The Grand Avalon Ballroom was a swirling storm of tension and fear. The glittering chandeliers, once symbols of opulence and celebration, now hung like watchful eyes over a crowd fraying at the edges. Suspicion had become the dominant language, spoken louder than any translator could interpret. Emily Carter stood near the far wall, her body tired but alert. Her heart still raced, the adrenaline refusing to fade as she replayed the night's chaotic events in her mind. Every fragment of conversation she had translated, every glance she had noticed, it all pointed toward one chilling truth. The threat wasn't external alone. Someone inside was orchestrating this nightmare. Claire Dawson approached her quietly, her usual sharp gaze softened with concern. "Emily," Claire said, lowering her voice so only she could hear, "we reviewed the security footage from the corridor near the private elevators, the restricted access area where no guest should be without clearance." Emily's stomach tightened. "And? A staff member, or someone dressed like one, moving suspiciously just minutes before the lockdown. Emily's eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd from her vantage point. Who? Claire hesitated, then spoke. Daniel Harding, the Swiss delegate. Emily's breath caught. Daniel Harding, the quiet man who had barely spoken, blending into the background as if he were part of the wallpaper. His reserved demeanor had made him almost invisible in the chaos. Yet now, he was the key suspect. He was close to Jonathan Blake when Jonathan was attacked, Claire added, and he had access to restricted areas. The news rippled through the crowd like a sudden storm. Guests whispered, eyes locking suspiciously on Daniel, who stood stiffly near the buffet, face pale but composed. Emily felt the weight of every accusation in the room pressing down like a physical force. The same man she'd barely noticed was now the epicenter of suspicion. Suddenly, Victor Reynolds, the Texas energy magnate, strode to the center of the room. His booming voice silenced the murmurs. "We don't have time for guesses and finger-pointing," he declared. "This summit is critical. We need solutions, not witch hunts." The crowd's attention fractured. Some nodded in agreement, others hissed in frustration. The old rivalries that had simmered beneath the surface now threatened to ignite into full conflict. Emily noticed Jonathan Blake's gaze fixed on Daniel with cold intensity. Despite his injuries, Jonathan's presence commanded attention. "I trusted you," Jonathan said quietly, but cutting through the noise like a blade. "You betrayed us all." Daniel's face twitched, the mask of calm slipping for a fleeting second. Then, surprisingly, he raised his hands, voice trembling. "I helped them," he admitted, "but not by choice. They threatened my family. I had no way out." A heavy silence fell over the room. Emily felt the complex web of fear, coercion and desperation tighten around them. Claire stepped forward, voice firm. "Daniel will be detained, but the bigger threat remains." Emily's mind raced. The missing black ledger, the document holding secrets that could topple governments, destroy fortunes, ruin lives, was still out there somewhere. If they find that ledger, the summit, and everything we're trying to protect, will collapse, Emily said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Jonathan nodded, his eyes sharp despite the bruises. "We need to locate it before they do." Claire pulled Emily aside. "You have a unique perspective. You've been listening, translating, connecting the dots in ways others haven't." Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'll do whatever it takes." The uneasy alliance between the billionaire Tycoons and the Waitress had solidified in the face of crisis. Claire, with her security expertise, Jonathan, with his sharp intellect and leadership, and Emily, the unlikely translator and mediator. Together, they began to piece together the fragments of information, tracing whispered rumors, secret deals, and the hidden movements of the night. Emily's linguistic skills became more than a tool. They were a bridge between worlds, unraveling lies and uncovering truths. But every answer brought more questions. The deeper they delved, the more they realized the betrayal cut through the core of the summit itself. And Emily felt a fire ignite inside her, a fierce determination born not from wealth or status, but from the raw will to survive and protect. The next move, she knew, would decide not just the summit's fate, but her own. The stakes had never been higher. The tension in the Grand Avalon Ballroom had reached a fever pitch. The luxurious space, once alive with whispered deals and sparkling laughter, now pulsed with fear, suspicion, and the brittle hope of survival. Emily stood at the center of it all, a quiet eye in a storm of chaos. Beside her, Claire Dawson's eyes scanned the crowd, sharp and unyielding, while Jonathan Blake leaned heavily on a nearby table, gathering his strength. The clock ticked relentlessly. Every minute brought them closer to the ransom deadline. $1 billion demanded, or lives would be lost. Claire's voice was steady as she addressed the gathered delegates. "We've identified the mole, Daniel Harding, but he's only a pawn. The real masterminds are still out there, controlling the situation." Suddenly, the room's large screens flickered on, displaying a live feed of a masked figure standing in the hotel's grand foyer. The figure's voice was distorted, cold, and calculated. "You have until the hour to meet our demands. Any attempt to intervene will result in casualties. The ledger is the key. Find it or lose everything." A collective shudder ran through the crowd. The ultimatum was clear. The next hours would decide everything. Emily's mind raced. The Black Ledger was the centerpiece of this deadly game. If it fell into the wrong hands, the summit's power players would be ruined, their secrets exposed, and the fragile balance of power shattered. "Where do we start looking?" Jonathan asked, his voice hoarse but determined. Claire pulled out a map of the hotel, her finger tracing paths through hidden corridors and private rooms. "We search everywhere. The ledger could be hidden in any secure room, any office. The attackers know the building intimately." Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She moved swiftly through the room, organizing search teams, translating urgent instructions, calming rising tempers. Her voice was the calm in the storm, the thread holding frayed nerves together. As teams dispersed, Emily found herself near the private elevator banks, the corridor where Daniel Harding had been caught on camera. She paused, the memories of earlier suspicions weighing heavily. Suddenly, a soft sound behind her made her spin around. Mark, the committee aide, was there, breathless. "We found something," he whispered urgently. He handed her a small leather-bound book, the Black Ledger. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it. The pages were filled with coded notes, lists of names, secret deals, and explosive information. The realization hit her. This ledger was a bomb waiting to detonate the summit's fragile peace. Before she could process further, the lights flickered again. The masked voice returned over the speakers. "You have the ledger. Now prove you can protect it." Suddenly, the doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open. A group of masked men stormed in, weapons drawn, moving swiftly toward the crowd. Emily's heart pounded. Claire shouted orders, security teams rushed to intercept, and chaos exploded. In the frenzy, Emily gripped the ledger tightly and sprinted toward a side exit. Her breaths came fast, but her steps were steady. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a shock. She ducked behind a pillar, catching her breath. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, ready to fight, but it was Jonathan. "We have to get this ledger safe," he said urgently. Together, they slipped away from the chaos, racing through the labyrinthine corridors. Emily's mind raced as she deciphered fragments of the ledger, piecing together names and alliances. They reached a secure communications room where Claire and Mark awaited. The three worked frantically to transmit the ledger's contents securely to trusted authorities. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, Claire sighed, relief flooding her face. "It's done. The truth is out." Emily looked around at the faces, some bruised, some tear-streaked, all changed. In that moment she understood none of them would ever be the same. The summit was over, but the world they had known had shifted. Emily felt a quiet strength rise within her. She had been a waitress, invisible, overlooked. Now she was a guardian of secrets, a savior of power, a voice in the silence. And as dawn crept over the New York skyline, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The first rays of dawn spilled through the tall windows of the Grand Avalon Ballroom, bathing the room in a soft golden light that seemed almost out of place after the long night of chaos. The grandeur of the space felt muted now, as if the glittering chandeliers and polished marble had absorbed the tension and fear that had filled the hours before. Emily Carter stood quietly by the wall, watching as the last guests gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Their faces were marked by exhaustion. Some wore bruises, others simply looked hollow from sleeplessness and shock. The billionaires and tycoons who had arrived with such confidence were now shadows of themselves, humbled by the events they had endured. Claire Dawson moved methodically around the room, giving final instructions to the hotel's security team and coordinating with law enforcement officials who had arrived after the lockdown was lifted. Her calm, no-nonsense demeanor was a stark contrast to the fragile humanity on display throughout the ballroom. Jonathan Blake, still nursing the injury on his temple, stood near the center of the room, his usually sharp eyes softened by fatigue but glowing with quiet gratitude as he observed Emily. She felt the weight of everything that had happened settle deep within her bones. Not long ago, she'd been an invisible waitress, navigating through crowds with trays of champagne, unnoticed and unremarkable. Tonight, she had become the linchpin holding together a group of the world's most powerful people. One by one, the attendees approached her. Some hesitated, unsure of how to address the young woman who had been so essential to their survival. Others smiled with genuine warmth, grateful for her calm presence amid the storm. Jonathan was among the first to speak. "Emily," he said softly, stepping closer, "you saved more than this summit tonight. Without your skills, your courage, I don't know what would have happened. Thank you." Emily shook her head, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "I was just doing what I could." But she knew it was more than that. Her years of studying languages in quiet rooms, juggling multiple jobs just to survive, had prepared her in ways she never expected. The 5 languages she spoke weren't just tools. They had become bridges between fractured people, lines of trust in a sea of suspicion. As the room slowly emptied, Emily found a quiet moment to stand alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, New York City was waking up. Taxis honked, street vendors set up their carts, and the distant hum of the early morning rush rose like a heartbeat. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to feel the full magnitude of the night's events. She had stepped into a world of immense power and danger, and had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger. A reporter from an international news network approached her gently, notebook in hand, eyes bright with curiosity. "Miss Carter," the reporter said, "would you be willing to tell your story? The world will want to know how you helped save this meeting of the world's richest and most influential." Emily hesitated, looking back at the fading crowd. Then, with steady resolve, she nodded. "Yes, because this is not just about billionaires or money. It's about people, about trust, about what we do when everything falls apart." Her voice carried a new weight, born of experience. Later, as she sat in a small corner cafe, the ledger safely secured in government hands, Emily reflected on how much the world had shifted and how much she had changed. She realized that the summit had been more than a gathering of power. It was a crucible that revealed the fragility beneath the surface, the hidden human stories behind headlines and fortunes. Her life had transformed overnight. The girl who once waited tables, unheard and unseen, was now recognized not for wealth or status, but for bravery, intelligence and heart. And as the morning light spilled fully over the city, Emily felt a new chapter beginning. The languages she spoke were no longer just survival tools. They were keys opening doors to new opportunities, new connections, and a future she hadn't dared imagine. The world was listening now, and Emily Carter was ready.